This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. We are ready to start. I am extremely sorry for the issues. We had some internet upgrade issues that caused us to have to reboot, and we are not live streaming tonight, unfortunately, or we are not live streaming tonight. Unfortunately, that was, we are unable to get that going, but the session will be recorded and broadcast. And we'll start this evening. So, and we have them mute. No, it's the command.
Trying to.
Phyllis, you put the camera.
Yeah. Trying to find him.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
I will call to order the Tuesday, August 4th meeting of the Monmouth City Council and ask for the roll call, please. Phyllis Bowman.
Councillor Beltz.
Here.
Councillor Carey.
Here.
Councillor Lopez.
Here.
Councillor Sharmer.
Here.
Councillor Schinkel is excused. Councillor Silbernagel.
Here.
Mayor Kuntz.
Here. And if all will mute, we will do the flag salute. Councillor Beltz, can I ask you to lead that and have everyone else mute yourselves?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And this evening, I will read our public comment script. We have a variety of types of comments this evening. I've got some folks in the room. We have one comment that was sent in advance to the city recorder, and we may have some folks online. So I would like to welcome everyone to the Monmouth City Council meeting. Comments from the community are entertained during the time designated under citizens' comments. If you wish to speak, please fill out the comment card. We have that. If you are online, please open the chat bubble in the upper right and type to Phyllis Bowman only your name and the topic on which you would like to speak. Speakers' comments in this forum are limited to 3 minutes. Tonight, if we have many speakers, I will potentially limit those to 2. I'm not sure how many folks are calling in to speak, so we'll take a look at that. Typically, a speaker's comment is taken under advisement to allow time for the council to review an issue. However, the mayor or councilors may ask a speaker for additional information or may convey some information that addresses their comment. Please note if you would like to receive follow-up communication. And I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance at this evening's meeting of Monmouth City Council. Tonight, we start off as we do with the consent calendar. And this week that consists of our minutes of July 21st. We held both a regular session and a work session of July 21st. And I will ask for any corrections or additions to the minutes or a motion to approve them as presented.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you, Councillor Beltz. A second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Councillor Silbernagel. And all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Seeing none. We will start off with our reports this evening. And the report I would like to make regards our Economic Development Commission and or advisory group at this point. We had discussed at our January retreat, seemingly forever ago, really learned about some potential economic development strategies, got some great information from presenters, and spent some time really thinking through sort of the framework for an economic development plan. That plan has been worked on by our interim city manager, Chad Olson, with our community development director, Sam Duffner, and other staff. And we would like to convene a group to really go through that plan, to sort of vet some of the early thinking that we have, to give continual advice to us and be able to come back and really adopt a plan. This is not a formal board or commission at this point. It is an ad hoc advisory committee, really advising our staff on that thinking. And so what I would like to do tonight, in your packet, there was a report from Chad Olson and Suzanne about the appointments that they have considered. And I really want to thank John Carey, who worked on this as well, developed some of these sort of ideas about how to proceed with this, and contacted many of these folks to determine their interest and availability for sort of a short-term stint on this advisory committee. Chad, did you have anything to add to this?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. No, nothing to add to it. I appreciate the work that the mayor and the two council members, Carey and Phelps, has done putting the list together. And Suzanne Duffner, the community development director, and I are looking forward to beginning it. And as I will remind everybody, this is an ad hoc committee. So the intention is to just have a limited number of meetings and then submit the report from the committee to the city council for its review, consideration, and ultimately adoption.
Great, thanks. And Councillor Carey or Councillor Belts, do you have anything to add to that?
Madam Mayor, I would only add that it's a what we believe to be a diverse group, a variety of different interests and abilities and experiences. Sort of cuts across a lot of our sectors. So we feel like it'll be a good sounding board and one that will be able to enhance some of the things that we've talked about. And that's one of the things that I'm sure they'll be anxious to do, is to how they can enhance and make suggestions, not only with respect to sort of the draft plan that's out there, but they'll be able to make it better with their own ideas.
Thank you so much. So what piece of business I have tonight, as usual, when I invite you to approve a list of folks to support us as volunteers in our work, in your packet this evening was actually a really amazing list of people who are interested and willing to help us on this venture. And I am going to ask for your motion to approve and the appointment of these folks to this ad hoc advisory committee.
I'll move to approve this list of individuals as appointments to the Monmouth Economic Development Strategic Planning Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Lopez. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Darren Silbernagel. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? That we will get them started on that work, and I really appreciate use of donation of their time to this effort so we can kind of get this moving. That's all I have. I'm going to leave time for citizen comments, but if there are any other reports for boards and commissions at this time, I would entertain those. And Councillor Sharma, your microphone is on. Do you have a report for us? Your group hasn't been meeting at all, I don't think so. Thanks. Any Councillor Belts?
Yes, I just wanted to report briefly. I'm the council representative on the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments Board, and we have had a subcommittee meeting, the Executive Director Search Subcommittee. We did meet virtually, and we helped design a recruitment brochure, very similar to what we designed for our own city manager search brochure. We designed it, made sure it had lots of photos of the entire region, not just Salem. And there's a beautiful, oops, I'm getting some feedback. Okay, there's a lovely photo from Western Oregon University in that brochure. And so the search firm, we all approved it, and that should be hitting the street in pretty short order. So if you know of anybody that might be an excellent executive director for the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments, please contact me, let me know, and I will forward that name on to the search firm. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Any other reports?
Councilor Lopez has a-
Yes, Councillor Lopez.
Hello, thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a MINET report. We met, and as part of our July meeting each year, or every 2 years, we do appoint new officers of the board of directors. And those new officers are David Ritchie, acting as president, who is a Monmouth resident. The vice president is Tom Pessemeyer, who is the city manager of the City of Independence, and myself as the secretary of the board. And in addition to these board appointments of officers, I'm happy to report that Willamette Valley Fiber installations and the expansion out into Dallas is back on track. The Monmouth and Independence, the original operation geographic area, has seen some growth as well. Not the physical area, rather, but new service signups. This is the first July in the past couple of years that we've actually seen an increase in service signups, and that's an increase across all the services we offer. And I'm really excited to see that people are taking advantage of this local asset that we have. That's MINET. All of this good news, I think, is reflected, and forgive me, Janet, for jumping ahead a little bit, but MINET is, you'll notice, mentioned positively in the financial update as well. So all things are going fairly well there. Finances aside, I know that we did have some previous outages last year, and we've completed a little while ago. We've completed the oh gosh, was it 2 years ago actually that we had the outages? Anyway, we completed the GPON upgrade project some time ago. We've also been doing quite a bit of work upgrading our internal redundancies, and so this is how MINET and MINET customers actually get out and speak to the rest of the greater internet. And that full system has new and upgraded redundancies as well, and should be very stable for the future.
Great. Okay. Don't see any other board and commission reports at this point. So we will move to Chad Olson for our interim city manager report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. So in the interest of time, and not to break any hearts, I'll go ahead and just mention a couple things that are in the report One, a reminder that Thursday, the council has a special meeting with Steve Worthington from Prothman at 5:30 to review finalists for possibly in-town interviews sometime towards the end of this month. So we're all excited about that. The finance director and I and Suzanne have been talking with Piper Sandler and Company. They're a financing company that we all have experience with over time, working towards some type of loan or debt issuance for the Urban Renewal Agency for the first couple years of projects that we have scheduled to perform. And I probably will ask the mayor to have a urban renewal meeting on the 18th. So kind of anticipate a half-hour meeting or so to brief the council on those things. And a reminder that your LOC legislative priority worksheet is due by Friday. The LOC is having a meeting next week, and they do want to see all the cities respond to that. So if you can get those to the city recorder, and we'll compile a composite and send those on to the League of Oregon Cities. And with that, I will just open for questions. Otherwise, I'm finished.
I'll just jump in. Chad, I just want to confirm that Thursday meeting time. I had it at 6 o'clock. 5:30, are we confirmed at 5:30?
Yes, and I'm sorry, maybe we didn't get that update. We hope to be able to start at 5:30 if that works for folks. So we had some folks who had to leave at 7, and we wanted to try and start a little earlier. Is that, if that works?
Yes, so hopefully that works with the council for an early start at 5:30. Try to finish by 6:30 to 6:45. There's some conflict meetings that evening, so we were looking for an early start, but that's not a requirement if there's other conflicts.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. So moving on to Janet Chenard, our Director of Finance for our fourth quarter, which is the fourth quarter of the fiscal year, so the one that ended June 30th. Janet?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and honorable council members. And I too will try and keep it short, although I do like to wax on at year end because there's been a lot of activity, obviously, for 12 months. In short, hopefully you had a chance to look at the packet, but the news is pretty good. Considering the times, the things that are not as good were expected, and that is that the street fund, of course, did come in. The gas taxes came in lower because fewer people are traveling and buying gas. And tourism fund, the last quarter, our local hoteliers and lodgings were hard hit as we expected. So. But nevertheless, we still ended up even, at about 3/4 of what we expected in revenues in both of those funds, and higher, in fact, in the street funds, so than 3/4. So that was not bad. And overall, the property tax revenues and state shared revenues, which are the big ticket revenues in the general fund, along with an influx, as I mentioned at a previous meeting, of coronavirus relief fund grant money, served to help us end the year about $140,000 higher in the general fund than we anticipated when we put the 2021 budget together. So, otherwise, that's all I have to say on how the funds are doing, generally very upbeat. I did want to draw your attention to page 33, where I did give a bit of an update on where we are with the PERS economic incentive funds, because of course, with all of the volatility that we've seen in the stock market through the last several months, the earnings were very hard hit in the March and April period, but have bounced back almost as much as they lost again. And so it's hard to know where we'll end the calendar year for earnings, which is part of what helps determine the rates. But we will know more in October from the actuaries as to what our employer rates are going to look like for the next biennium. And right now, it's really hard to tell, but it's still looking positive because of a number of the initiatives that came through in Senate Bill 1049, as well as the fact that Council approved setting aside some reserve funds from last year into a separate side account. That should also help our bottom line. So overall, we were seeing that rates may actually only go up about 0.6% based on the actuarial estimates most recently given. So that's good news. And with that, I think I would take any questions you have.
Yes, Councillor Carey.
Just very quickly, Janet, I noted in on your, green and yellow chart, the sewer and water were under budget, and then right below that SDC, while revenues were down, we were still our reserves were higher. Good news, bottom line. I guess I'm a little curious as to, why did we just stop spending money because we were concerned with revenues, or did we over budget and and not really have the project or bandwidth to be able to expend the dollars? It's not a criticism on either, and I'm just curious as to, coming out of the budgeting process and meeting these fund balances, we need to be cautious in terms of how we're allocating and spending.
Right. So with the water fund, it is still bolstered somewhat by the loan from the sewer fund, and that's helping the fund balance there. As always, we don't get capital projects completed as timely as we'd like, because we do try to put a lot on our program plate. And so there were definitely savings. As far as staff turnover, we really didn't have any. And so it was primarily in the capital project area, as you surmised.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you for that, Janet. And I do appreciate that there's a lot more great information in there. And I'm sure she'll take additional questions privately, but appreciate the brief report. So thank you very much. And that does bring us to the time for citizen comments. And I do have some folks here in the room, so I will start with that. Again, if you are on the meeting and you'd like to speak, be sure and let Phyllis Bowman know so that she can let me know when it's time to get there. Our computer, we don't have a computer this time, so public comment can come up to over, which one? We're coming up here where the facing the big television
It doesn't matter, either
screen.
mic will work.
Is the camera on the TV working?
No,
Okay.
but I can actually put mine, now that I'm done my presentation, I can put mine down there and then.
Well, the vocal we'll have the voice.
The voice,
The
yeah.
microphone.
Do we want to have a camera?
Hey.
Your call.
We'd have to sanitize your computer.
That's true.
Okay.
So the microphone here facing the television. So first of all, we have Carol McKeel. And Carol, if you'll let us know what city you reside in and join us up here. Yeah, thank you. Here? Yeah, thanks. I know, we all moved this time.
Remember to take my mask off this time.
It's a little easier to be heard.
So Carol McKeel from Monmouth. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. At the City Council meeting on June 30th, our community group presented 6 proposals that would begin the process of making Monmouth a safe place for all our residents. We presented 2 stories at the last City Council meeting. Today, we would like to provide another story that demonstrates that our Black residents and residents of color experience harassment from the police. We hope this story helps the City Council understand the critical need to make changes in our city so that everyone can feel safe. Here's the story.
Could you speak up, please?
Can you hear me okay in the microphone?
Yes, they
Okay.
can hear you online.
As one of very few Black residents, I face racism every single day. The cops are no exception to this racism. The Monmouth Police in particular have racially profiled, harassed, and discriminated against me because of the way I look. I am a college graduate, contribute to my community through charity events, and love my small town. Unfortunately, no amount of good or positive can protect me from racism. I have had a gun pulled on me for routine traffic stops by Monmouth Police, who later the officers did not recall pulling their guns out. I could go on and on about specific incidents, but what good would that do? I am exhausted and tired of trying to prove racism is real in our town, and it affects people of color. I am tired of police justifying their racist acts or denying them altogether. It is time that we move past awareness and into action. Thank you.
And Bodie Bemrose, same thing, if you'd hear. Yes.
There's quite a group out there. I promise you'd wave at them.
Oh, okay.
Can you do that? 'Cause they're getting antsy and I don't want anyone to.
No, we see them out there. They're on camera. We've been able to see them. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here and waiting. That's okay, Bodie, this mic. Okay. All right. Then you can take your mask off once you're seated.
Okay,
So
it's been a
you're-
little while since I've been here, so I need to introduce myself, right? Okay. My name is Bodie Bemrose. I grew up here and I've invested my life into this community, and I've sacrificed a great deal to make our downtown and community a better place. Our buildings house many local businesses and residents throughout this county. But on a weekly basis now, I have residential tenants suffering from mental health issues related to the chaos, rampant shaming, and increased government control over our lives. Small businesses already struggling to get through COVID-19 are now being harassed by the BLM movement, shaming and making threats in person, on the phones, and on social media, all in an effort to shame and destroy their businesses. And then we are greeted at the intersections by educators and professors that actually live here with intimidating signs that read, "White silence is violence." And now, from what I understand, is that you are considering their demands to defund the police and conduct racial profiling surveys upon our citizens. Is this supposed to bring peace and awareness? Is this supposed to improve race relations? So what's really going on here? Well, for me to know the answer to this, all of us need to start having serious discussions about an ideology behind all of this. We all know that behind all forces of life, there is an ideology, some good, some bad. The ideology that governs us is critically important. Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and our founding fathers knew this. This is why they created a true form of self-government, maximum freedom for all citizens in that nation, regardless of your race or creed. We are here tonight, and those people out there are here tonight, to support and defend our policemen and women. Why we believe in law enforcement? The United States of America was founded. I'm going to keep going just so you know.
That's fine. You have a minute.
Okay. The United States of America the principles of liberty, justice, rule of law enforcement is essential to preserve our freedom, and we reject any assault on the men and women of law enforcement. In 1776, John Adams spoke of the Republic as an empire of laws and not of men, and the American Republic would be a nation conceived on the basis of individual liberty and the rule of law, not upon the emotional whims of tyrants. Our brave women and men risk their lives every day to maintain a civil society. Our law enforcement, our police, they preserve both democracy and decency, and they protect the national treasure we call the American dream, and no one is going to take that away from us. I'm a history guy, but it doesn't take much reading for one to discover what happens when you remove law and order. The locals are forced to take things into their own hands. Do you think our common citizens are trained in de-escalation tactics when a threat is present? Do you think your neighbor, when he or she feels threatened, has the patience, the skills, and body armor to react like a trained police officer? I know they don't. And history will reveal that when common citizens cannot rely on law enforcement to protect them, the common citizen will remove the threat immediately and forcefully and ask questions later. Do you know what the word vigilante means? Let me read what Webster says. A member of a self-appointed group of citizens who undertake law enforcement in their community without legal authority, typically because legal agencies are inadequate. This is human nature, and we know this. We do not want this. We will not allow our nation to become like others that have failed. The most horrific reality of these nations that lost their freedom was the number of deaths committed by the hand of governments upon their own people. And those death statistics are always led by the Marxists, communists. I quote, "The only thing necessary for triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. If you support law enforcement, we will back you. We must defend the men and women who keep our neighborhoods safe."
So
Like hang on here, but like BLM movement, I know they have a lot of demands for you guys. We have some requests and demands of our own. We want to increase the budgets to accommodate the following: to educate the public with a better understanding of the realities of policing in the 21st century, especially now, more than ever. Number two, to educate the public on the unique needs of the American law enforcement officers. Our policemen and women have very difficult jobs, and they face harsh realities that we never see. Number three, provide support and challenges, and to accurately go against anti-police rhetoric polluting the trust of our citizens towards our brave men and women. Number four, offer news and analysis that educates every citizen on the latest issues relevant to the safety of our community. And number five, uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And this is a big one for all of us. All of you, law officials, and our leaders have signed and sworn to defend the Constitution of the United States. If any of you believe in or are pushing for a different government ideology that is in direct conflict of our freedoms and the Constitution, I hate to say this, but I think you need to resign. We need you to be honest. We need you to be honest to all of our citizens. We need to know what you believe in. Cease, I've always liked you. You've been great. 15 years ago, I started working on these old buildings, and you rooted me on, and I appreciate that.
still do, buddy.
And I've worked hard to make all you guys look good, and it's been fun. And I really wish we were having a debate about whether we can connect the Ash Creek bike path, but I miss those days. But today, in our society and what's going on in our nation, it's real. People are scared, and we need to join together. We cannot divide each other anymore. We have to pull this around. So the only other question I have, Cease, is I wrote a letter to you and John McCardle, and I copied our police chiefs when I read the community letter that said you guys were going to have meetings with community leaders to improve race relations. And I don't know why you guys didn't respond to me or invite me to those meetings. And I hear, I don't know for sure, I hear through the grapevine that you guys are having private meetings without law enforcement involvement. You're not having community involvement, but these meetings are with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I don't know why.
So, and I will be glad to talk to you about that separately, Bodie, because we don't typically respond at public comment.
Sure.
I think I've mentioned multiple times in this group that is the meeting, the mayor's roundtable is regarding a wide variety of issues. It is not a meeting with Black Lives Matters organizers. It is a meeting with community volunteers, including those working on education, homelessness, food insecurity. We've got a wide variety of volunteers in that meeting. And the issues are wide ranging. So it is not focused specifically on law enforcement. And there will be opportunities for more people to engage. And I think definitely I will be glad to talk to you separately about some other things, but just to let you know about that.
I appreciate that. And I also want to clarify and emphasize that the tone in my voice is not necessarily my own. It is the tone of my tenants, my coworkers, contractors, regular folks here in this town. And I'm just trying to portray to you to get the message across that people need to be heard. And they love this nation. They love their freedoms. They love this community. And number one, these people that love this nation are from all nationalities. We are a diverse group of people, and we absolutely reject racism. We absolutely reject discrimination, and we won't stand for it. We absolutely will not. But we cannot drive a wedge and now start segregating people by race again. That's what's going on.
Okay.
So anyway, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
I appreciate the time.
And I'll check, Bodie. Typically, Phyllis may ask to have some of that in writing for the records since it was extensive. I'll check back with you on that as well. Thank you. And Terry Richards, did you have something to add to that? I'll give you mentions the same topic. So if you
Oh, yeah, I think it's the same topic. Hi, everybody. I'm Terry Richards, and I've had a Monmouth and Independence address since our family moved here in 1948. So we're not going to move. I heard about this organization about a week ago, and I was concerned then, and I'm really concerned now with what's been going on in our nation and in our state. I have a lot of faith that you on the council and the mayor and everyone has enough Thomas Paine in you. And I'm sure you do that, you know, anything that would defund the police is ludicrous. Look what's happening in Portland. It's just absolutely, I'm embarrassed of our state for what's going on. It's ridiculous. I'm a veteran. I'm a disabled veteran. I served our country. And on July 26, 1968, when I got out of the Army, I was accosted by protesters. I'll never forget it. And I'll never forgive them. I'm a businessman. I'm retired. I've written thousands of paychecks, and I've written my name on the front paychecks, not the back. We can't let our communities like this go down a rabbit hole. We have to be fiscally responsible to everyone involved. And it's somebody else's turn to talk now.
Thank you, Terry.
You bet.
That's what all we have here in the room. Phyllis, you have at least one written comment to share with us. And do we have other people on the line who would like to speak?
No one has talked to me in the chat group. I just have the one letter that was sent in by Nan Willis.
All right, go ahead with that.
So this is citizens' comment regarding stormwater utility fees. The council has approved a water rate increase and a power and light increase totaling customers about $6 a month or $72 a year. During the budget process, it was stated that without a 3 to 5% increase in water and electrical rates, none of the council priorities would take place. The council chose the higher 5% figure, so we can assume there's plenty for the city to do. But no, the city now needs a stormwater utility fee. What is the appropriate level of service for stormwater? According to the consultants, when I heard them speak, $11.25 was a status quo proposal and $16.94 was a proactive proposal. Is proactive the new necessary, a euphemism for going above and beyond providing basic services? I do believe the council is tone deaf to either rate increase. The burden of property taxes in Oregon is well known. From 2015 to 2020, these have increased by 4.2% a year. During that same period, the median change in utility rates was 6% a year. Along with property taxes, Oregon ranks as the third highest income tax state at 9.9%. California is 13.3% and Hawaii is 11%. While there is no general sales tax, sales and gross receipts and fees contribute to 24% of the state budget. Oregon citizens pay plenty for services. Now the city wants money in addition to its $72 per year for utilities, anywhere from $135 to $203 for stormwater fees. Here's an attempt to improve your hearing. The percent of family budget that goes to housing has risen 30 to 40% today. Oregon's poverty rate is 12%. This means that utility increases for about 1,200 people in Monmouth would be an outright hardship, and this doesn't even speak to the working poor. While I appreciate that council members receive no pay, I would hazard that none of the council members fall into either of these two groups. During the budget process, it was shared that stormwater utility rates varied from a low of about $5 per month to a high of about $17 per month in Salem. Corvallis rates are $9.29 per month. When did Monmouth get such a big ego to set rates at $11 to $17 per month? Are you suggesting that after decades of good stewardship and conservative spending, Monmouth's infrastructure is so poor that we now must play catch up compared to other cities? The mayor has stated that raising the rates is the only way to pay for what needs to be done. What needs to be done? Provide services or provide proactive service? It's good to be proactive when you have the time, money, and resources, but the proactive rate increase assumes that money is readily available from citizens who are dependent upon utilities. Can the council rationalize that public input for this increase was genuinely achieved? I hope that the council makes bold and breaks set from the oh so wise consultants that have been hired to affirm what they think the council wants to hear about the new and improved revenue stream. In my opinion, the council can set the stage now by setting the rate below those recommended. That would be a clear demonstration of your ability to listen. You may certainly take the money and run now. However, citizens may turn out to be equally tone deaf to the city's need for a new city hall in the future. Thank you for your time. Dan Willis, Monmouth, Oregon.
All right. Thank you, Phyllis. So no other comments submitted. All right.
Just
Thank
a
you very
moment.
much. Oh,
I think, okay, I guess not. There were just a couple comments in the chat that aren't people that want to comment.
those are recorded. Again, all of these comments are part of our public record and are
Actually-
reviewed. And
I would like to comment. I'm the one that left the message.
Okay, go ahead and introduce yourself, your name and the city where you reside, please, and then.
Yes, my name is Felix Oliveros. Yes, my name is Felix Oliveros. I'm a resident of Monmouth. I was born in Salem and grew up in Independence. I just want to state for the record, I am a Marine Corps veteran. I served my country. I love my community. I love our police officers and what they do for us every day. And I, for the record, just want to stand and say that I do believe in the Black Lives Matter movement. And there are veterans that do support that movement. And I would be happy to talk to anyone about that and how this movement is not meant to divide people. It is meant to bring us together, to understand each other. That's all I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have one item of business this evening before we adjourn to our work session. And so we will go ahead and hear from our Community Development Director, Suzanne Duffner, on an agreement.
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. Again, my name is Suzanne Duffner. I'm the City of Monmouth Community Development Director, and you have before you this evening a draft development agreement for Phase 8 of the Edwards Addition Planned Unit Development. The request is for council to authorize the city manager to enter into a development agreement upon substantial completion of the public improvements for the subdivision. The city just recently received a request from the developer, Eric Olson of Edwards Addition, to enter into this agreement. This is based on a couple of different local and state laws. The state legislature recently passed a bill which allows the developer of a subdivision to submit building permits to begin construction of the residential dwellings in that development once the public improvements have been substantially completed, provided that the developer do enter into an agreement to complete the remaining improvements for the subdivision. So we also have language in our city code that authorizes kind of this deferral, temporary deferral of some of those subdivision improvements. We do require council to approve the agreement, hence the reason it's before you this evening. And it also needs to be secure, have some kind of financial guarantee or secure in case the developer does not complete those improvements, then the city can step in and make sure that those improvements are completed. So you do have the draft attached in your report in your packets this evening. There are a couple of pieces that are highlighted that we'll need to fill in, the city staff working with the developer on that to get the specific list of improvements that haven't been completed. So all the major improvements, the water, the sewer lines will be there. It's more of the finishing work that would be kind of on that, I call that the punch list of remaining items that need to be done. So that will be forthcoming along with an estimate of the cost to complete those improvements, and the draft final plat will get included as an attachment to that exhibit. So I have had the city attorney review that and comment on it. You have three alternatives before you this evening. You can authorize the city manager to enter into that development agreement once it's been finalized. You could make some amendments to the draft development agreement or take no action on it. Noted in the report that there really are no direct financial implications to the city because the agreement will be secured with a financial guarantee. So in case those improvements haven't been completed, the city can step in with that guarantee to complete those improvements. So there is a sample motion also included in your report. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Suzanne. Any questions about this? We recently completed a somewhat similar agreement with the developer in order to allow them to continue on with some of their work partially complete. But this looks to be a much more extensive option specified in a recent piece of legislation. So something new to us to provide such an extensive agreement to continue. And again, we are authorizing this Chad to enter into negotiations and to continue to refine this based on sort of the things to fill in. And if there are no questions, then I would entertain the suggested motion.
All right, I'll make that motion. And thank you for helping us out, Suzanne, with that. I move to authorize the city manager to sign and enter into a development agreement for the Edwards Addition Phase 8 subdivision upon substantial completion of the required subdivision improvements.
Second.
It has been moved by Councillor Sharma and seconded by Councillor Belts, I think it was, to enter into this agreement. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 And any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So if we're ready, I think we can continue on with our agenda rather than taking a break.
Yep.
As long as my speaker here is ready. And we have some folks on the line joining us to discuss our work session agenda item, which is the new City Hall schematic design, moving forward in that process. So
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, and I'd like to first thank FFA for being patient. We had some technical difficulties when we started the meeting, and so we're running a little bit behind, but thanks for staying with us on this. So basically, we'll just have FFA take over. The only introductory comment that I want to make is there's been a lot of work that's been done by the consultant and city staff behind the scenes, and I did believe it was an appropriate time to bring the final draft design and the cost estimates to the council for a status report and a check to see what it is. We do have the cost estimates, so we will review that, and Janet and I have also discussed funding options, and the intent is not for any final decisions. It's to brief the council and then to solicit input into next steps. But again, we're not looking for the council to take action tonight, but we do want to review the project and get some feedback on it. So with that, Troy, I will turn it over to FFA.
Thanks very much, Chad. Appreciate the opportunity to present where we are with the schematic design effort. And I'm here today to present along with team members Richard Grace and Joe Malvo. We're going to do a little backtracking, a little bit of review of where we've been, and then we're going to discuss the design as it's been developed so far, and finish off with reviewing the cost estimate.
Phyllis,
So,
would we be
Joe?
able to have the screen?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So, Madam Mayor and honorable council members, can you all see this graphic? Okay. Is it big enough for you to read? Okay. So we'll go ahead. The pages are in different orientations, but we'll go ahead with this. So Joe, could you forward, please? So a little bit of history. FFA was hired to look at essentially a feasibility study last year of what a new city hall approach might look like. And we started really at ground zero at that point, looking at a number of options for replacement of existing facilities wholly or in part with the new facility. And we vetted those options from a functional point of view and a cost point of view. And we also worked with staff to develop a program of required spaces for the city hall. That option study was completed about a year ago now. And we had some very basic diagrams, a preliminary cost estimate, which wasn't as complete or well vetted as the one we have now. The major element that came from that phase one study was the determination that the best approach was to look at options, further design options for a new city hall structure that combined the functions that are in the current city hall and volunteer hall. So one of the things then that the city asked us to do when we were looking at this was a more worked out design, which would better reflect how the site could be redeveloped. And it would also allow us the opportunity to engage the public for more detailed input about how the citizens of Monmouth felt the city hall should be. What should the influences be? What were important elements of it? And we had 2 of those meetings. We had 3 in our plan, but COVID-19 stepped in and altered that a little bit. But we got good input from the 2 meetings that we did have in January and February. And so we've incorporated that into our considerations. So the schematic design scope of work includes vetting the actual building code, zoning, developing site plans, floor plans, and other detailed drawings, creating a real preferred option of design, one which incorporates all the input we've gotten, and input from engineers, so that we have narratives systems and better inform the cost estimate. Joe, next, please. So the project goals, these are a development of those goals that we started to talk about last year. So these goals are important to keep in mind as we walk through the design. Number 1, the project should help facilitate a strong connection between City Hall, Main Street, and Main Street Park. The building should be right-sized for Monmouth. This is very important when it comes to just the square footage of the building, but also the massing of the proposal. Building should be functional, efficient, and sustainable. This is a long-term investment in a facility that will likely serve the city for not just decades, but for generations. The court and council chamber should be a flexible environment that can convert between uses while remaining functional, and that the security needs of both programs are met. And then last but not least, the building should be an asset to the community. Next. So before we describe this in detail, I just wanted to, in transition to other speakers, I just wanted to mention that the scope of work for the project is enlarged a little bit from last year in the site area, and that we realized that not only do we have the parking area for the city hall, but we have a parcel to the west that the city owns that is used for parking as well. And so we felt that it was important for the project scope to be complete, that we include redevelopment of that portion of city property to provide a much needed parking area for the proposed new facility. And again, just to remind everyone, the approach here is to create a new City Hall facility that accommodates the City Hall public service and office functions, as well as municipal court space, spaces for court staff. And the court space then doubles as the City Council chamber as well. This proposal obviously then proposes to remove the existing City Hall and Volunteer Hall both in order to redevelop the site. So with that, Joe and Richard, if you would go ahead and take off and describe in a summary fashion what we've got going with the design proposal.
Sure. I'll walk through the floor plan layout. Before I do, just so it's worth noting the building is divided into the court city council chamber element on the east side of the L, and then the other portion is and that the court city council chamber part is 1 story, and then the more business function city portion is 2 story. So here we have a first floor plan, north being up. So there's a bar in the middle where you can enter from Main Street on the top, or parking on the bottom of the screen. And that area has the lobby and essentially the core and circulation between the floors. So
Joe, maybe if you could point out with your arrow
Sure
that
thing.
main circulation spine, that would help.
Sure thing. Yeah, that circulation is here. Here's the entrance on Main. Here is the entrance where you would enter if you parked in the parking lot. So on this side of the space, we have the council courts and their associated functions. The space here accommodates, just as it's set up here, 96 seats in this area, and then we have presenters and the dais in the back. We also have extensive glazing, and this can open up to outside. This portion of the building, we have various rooms to support the court and council storage, and then there's also a point of access and a counter here for the clerk. So this can be sort of a closed off portion if need be. And back in the other side of the building, we have generally finance offices here with an open desk space, counter space to the public entry, and on the south end of that part of the building, we have sort of general use rooms, a meeting room, break room, some technical space. In the core, we have stair, an elevator, and this is repeated on both floors. We have a public toilet. This toilet is for city use back here. Technical, just electrical room, and a janitor space, janitor closet that is accessible from the lobby. There's also a second stair in the back here for egress. Going to the second floor, we have stairs up to lobby similar to the first floor. We tried to maintain the circulation bar here, and it does show up in the fenestration on the front and back, and kind of how the space is used. The north portion of this floor is the city manager, city recorder space, meeting rooms, storage for those spaces, and other support space. The city recorder did request a bunch of storage, so we have given her that. We have a toilet for the public up here, a toilet for city employees, and on this end of the space, community development and building offices and open space for employees, helping in those areas. And there is a layout counter here on this floor to work with the public between the space and the lobby. Also on the second floor, there's this door to a terrace for employees to have a break. And so this is out on the roof of the first floor space. And moving through these documents, we just have a couple sections here. The floor height in this portion are 14 feet. The court council space is 17.5, and then it's hard to do on my mouse because it's blocking, but the portion surrounding the council court over here is 13 feet, so that you can step out from the second floor onto the roof here, and we can have pavers and drainage and whatnot. So yeah, so these are just kind of giving a look at the space and relative to each other in size, and also we have here the stair core and elevator. So with that, I will pass it over to Richard.
I think one of the main considerations that we got from everyone in terms of our meetings, from the staff as well as the community, is that this building will be here for a long time, that it needs to kind of make a contribution to the character of the main street. So we, as a team, we really looked at the design of this project, that whatever we put in here for generation, that it will need to anchor this site, and it will make a good contribution or relationship to what you have in terms of the pattern of the buildings that you have. The things that you have right now needs to be reinforced, that this building will be a good neighbor. So what we've done is really make sure that we understand what you have in your main street. The first diagram that you see on top is the notion of transparency in the ground floor of your buildings. There is a very definitive storefront in the ground floor of all your building in Main Street. We wanted to carry that through in the City Hall, especially the two-story volume that really kind of engages the Main Street. The second one on the middle, if you look through and walk through the street, you would assume that majority of the entries of all these historic buildings would be in the middle. It's actually majority of them are on the corner, which is actually part of your zoning code as well, that most of the entries that we looked at were actually a corner entry. So we put that as part of consideration when we were designing the building. As part of how we put together the building as well as an L shape, it really created a good interaction between the entry of the building and a public plaza in the front of the building that also relates to a big giant tree that you have in the corner. So they kind of all reinforce each other. The other huge consideration is really sustainability, I think, in terms of goals. figuring out a way to kind of have a building that have good solar access, the orientation that allows you to kind of control daylight and have access for the building. North and south exposure is probably the best. On the south, you could control it, and north is basically you have no glare. So we have that as consideration for the design of the building. Next one, Joe. As I mentioned, I think if you walk on the street, on Main Street, there's a level of patterns and rhythms and things that you see on the existing historic building and even on the smaller building that contributes to the character of your city. We take those into consideration. There is a lot to consider in terms of scale, in terms of proportion, in terms of the size of the windows, the shape of the windows. Majority of them are actually on the second floor in terms of kind of the patterning that happens. Every bay, when you say bay, it's like where there's a column line that happens in between. There's maybe 3 windows or 4 windows. But the proportions of the windows that you have are very vertical. You know, they are not big, expansive on the second floor. They're more of very skinny punch opening on masonries. Those are all the things that we've considered to be part of what we designed for you for the City Hall. The last diagram is actually the massing of the building. If you look at the image on the bottom, there's this pretty nice contour of the buildings up and down. It sets you a rhythm a little bit. And by having a 1.5 story, 1 story, and a 2 story on the City Hall, it gives you a good relationship to what you have in the city. And it allows you to kind of relate better to what you have. The little elevation that you see in the middle on that bottom image is it's just a simple elevation of the building that we have, and it scale-wise and width-wise and the window patterns, they relate well to what you have existing-wise in the Main Street. Next one, Joe. So this would be a view across the street in Main Street. So you could see the 2-story volume that engages the street, the transparent storefront on the bottom, and we're considering as well privacy for the staff that are sitting there. So more than likely we would allow light and a little bit of a translucency in there, but necessarily all open for people to be peering in as you walk by. The corner entry kind of recessed in. The windows on top on the second floors are smaller vertical windows that sets a little bit of a rhythm, but yet the big window in the corner kind of gives you another hint that that's the entry point for the building. Recessed back, and it's almost like having a front porch for your City Hall. That plaza allows you to kind of set back a little bit. That gives you a little bit of a security and a buffer to the Main Street. There's a level of transparency, but yet again privacy. But as you could imagine at night, when you're doing a city council meeting like this, that there's a little bit of a glow, a golden glow back there with the wood ceiling being lit, and that whole notion of your city working hard, and that the community can watch it. So that ceremonial front porch kind of allows you to kind of have this setting that sets you up for what you do as a city council. Next one, Joe. So this would be the back entry that Joe was mentioning, where the parking lot would be, the court, which is this one's court offices to the right, and then the 2-story office on the left. And on the ground level, the same patterns kind of on the top, and then again a storefront very open on the bottom, where the kind of the break room for the staff, as well as a conference room to the left. We felt that especially in the exterior, that there's a masonry language that you have in the city, and again masonry would last for a generation in terms of material. There's a level of integrity and again, a material that, it's really easy to maintain as well. So I think we felt that the character and the materials should really relate to what you have in the city. Next one, Joe. We move into the inside of the building. This view would be looking north. That little door all the way in the back would be the main entry on Main Street. There would be a plaza. You get a little bit of a glimpse on the kind of the spine circulation in the middle of the building to the middle of the image, and to the right would be the courts and the city council chamber. There would be a stair that goes up to the second floor. As you could see, we look at a material that not only material that gives you a little bit of warmth, but it's basically the structure of the building. It's a timber structure that gives you an opportunity to not use it just as structure, but always also as a finish for your building. So you're not layering extra finishes for the building. So it gives you a little bit of a sustainability point in terms of really utilizing the structure. It's not just a structure, but a finish for the building. Next one, Joe. So this would be the courts, city council chamber, and the community event space. It's very well lit, very warm. It's probably a little bit different from volunteer hall in terms of what it feels like. There's a 1.5 story height to it. There's a balance of light from the south to the right, and then a big expanse of glass to the left that opens up into a plaza when you have a big community event space that allows you to kind of open it up and have inside and outside kind of blurred and be part of one big space. Again, as you can see, the structure is the finish, especially on the ceiling, the columns, and the back where the dais is. It's all structural timber wood. It gives you kind of that warm glow at night, and it gives you kind of that good feeling about a very warm space, an inviting space.
All right, Joe, if you could enlarge this a bit.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll discuss the cost estimate as it stands right now. This is a summary cost estimate provided by our cost estimating consultant, which is ACC Cost Consultants. We've worked back and forth with them as we've finished out the schematic design package to refine this estimate, and we feel as though it's a good representation of the level of design effort that we're at this point. The overall area of the project in terms of gross square footage is 15,171, which is actually a little bit, a few hundred square feet less than we had in the very generic kind of preliminary planning from last year. The cost, including site work, is estimated right now at a little over 7.6 million. There are a couple of alternates there. One, this estimate is for direct construction cost only, and it's assuming a construction start date of June of next year. If construction doesn't start until the following year, approximately March of the following year, there's an estimate there of some additional dollars to account for escalation. There's also a alternate for upgrading the brick in the sense that right now the brick appearance is fairly subdued and not a lot of in and out, and the kinds of things that cause the installers to take more time doing the work, creating some really elaborate kinds of detailing that might reflect the detailing of the historic buildings on Main Street more exactly. So there's an estimate of what it would take to do that there. You might ask yourself, should we have escalation in this due to our current economic circumstances? And that's why we have a cost estimating consultant there recommending that we continue to assume that there will be escalations, as that there was a lot of construction work in the pipeline when COVID-19 hit, and a lot of that work is continuing. So at least in the short term, our estimating consultant feels as though it's wise to continue to assume that there will be escalations in the next couple of years. Joe, could you go ahead to the next page, please? So this is a breakdown, which they go into excruciating detail on subsequent pages, which we won't get into. But Joe, if you could kind of scroll up a little bit and then enlarge the bottom part where we've got below the subtotal. So this is just to show that there's a subtotal that accounts for the construction costs, and then there are other elements in this that typically make up what we call direct construction cost. And I'm going to go through those things very briefly. So in addition to the subtotal amount, there's an estimating and design contingency of 10%, which is $563,000. And we've included that in there because as complete and final as these drawings that we've just presented may look, there are a lot of details about the design, engineering details, architectural details that really haven't been worked out yet. And so that's what that number is there for. And it's also there in that it gives us a pool of fund in which we can work relative to value engineering the project, which we always need to do. And we can always find value in looking at alternatives. There's also the index to construction start of 5% that I mentioned, and that takes you to mid next year. That's $310,000 roughly. Then there's the contractor's typical overhead and profit and general conditions, insurance, bond, et cetera. Those amounts are fairly typical in the industry, and our cost estimator, we rely on them to put those in there properly. So that then gives us a total of 7.6 million in the estimate. And then the breakdown at the bottom of the page between the building and the site work and utilities, with the building being at 6.9 million, the site work at 700,000. Looking at this another way, Joe, if you could go to the next page. The direct construction cost is only one part of getting a project like this completed. So in addition to the direct construction costs that I've just reviewed, there's also costs that we call project costs or soft costs. And those involve a number of things. They involve fees from people like ourselves and our engineers and other consultants. It involves project contingencies that the city might be carrying, other fees such as fees for permitting and testing and inspections, administration, interest, and other expenses that the city may need to carry. This is an estimate of that we usually carry that's a certain percentage of the direct construction cost. And in this case, we've also gone to the effort to put together an estimate of what the additional architectural and engineering services would be. Chad requested us do that. So within this text, there's a number there, an estimate of about 575,000 for all of the estimated architecture and engineering fees to complete the project through the end of construction that are part of this roughly 1,150,000 in project or soft costs. One thing to note, there are several items which we're unsure of at this point, and the city's unsure of at this point in the project, regarding whether, where the staff would move to provide services while this construction happens. Would they need to lease, or would they be able to use a facility the city may already own? So there's leasing questions about moving and leasing costs, land acquisition costs. Those are not included. There are also not included here is if the city decides to pursue LEED or any other recognition of sustainability, those costs for consultants as well as the actual certifications are not included in this. Last element here, as this would be an all new facility, and the age and condition of the existing furniture, fixtures, and equipment that the city has, we felt it was correct to include an estimate of costs for all new what we call FF&E. So that to provide all new furniture, seating, office systems, elements for the city council chamber comes in at just under $200,000. That doesn't include things like equipment such as computers and copiers, AV equipment and that kind of thing. This is an element that sometimes is included if there's a bond measure for financing. Sometimes this is funded from other sources or on a yearly basis. But assuming that it might be part of a funding package overall, we thought it was important to include it. And so the total estimated project cost is right around $9 million at this point. So that concludes our presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Chad.
Thank you, Troy. Yeah, there was one comment that I wanted to make related to the FF&E cost, the $191,000. So that number is, it can flex anywhere between 0 to 5%. And when we were looking at it, originally we had a 5% figure that we were discussing. I went back to FFA and talked to them about the magnitude of that cost. I thought was, you know, the city probably won't be looking to replace all of its furniture and equipment. Some of the stuff that Troy mentioned, your computers and copiers and things like that. So we included the 2.5%, recognizing that you will have to do something. There's no doubt about that. And for example, the first thing the council probably will want to do is make sure that they outfit the council chambers with sufficient audiovisual equipment to ensure that you can conduct your meetings live stream in every which way that you want. I participated in a project like that once, and I can tell you it's not cheap. I think St. Helens spent close to $75,000 to outfit it. But I just want to make you aware that that number can go up and down, and there's time to work on it. And one thing that FFA and I talked about is we can include it in the budget, and you can also include a year or two out to kind of fill out the occupancy as you move in. So there's not a urgent need to, you know, have everything perfect when you move in. You can use your budgeting over a couple years to kind of fill that out and use operating expenses versus debt service, for example. But the last point I want to make about that is you have options, and it may not be 2.5%, but you have some control over that figure as compared to some of the other figures. Okay, that's the only comment I wanted to make, and we'll turn it back over to the mayor for, I'm sure there's questions.
I would imagine there are, so Bram. Questions, comments? Councillor Belts.
This may seem like a picky or silly question, but I was looking at the public restroom on the first floor, and it looks like it's just one big restroom. Are we doing gender neutral restrooms now, or who's that for?
Yeah, the proposal right now is for it's not a gender neutral restroom exactly. It's called an all user restroom. And so each of the toilet rooms is a separate space that you go in and lock the door. The communal piece is where the sinks are. And this is something that we're doing in our public buildings now. across a number of different use types. And so it has certain advantages. And one of them is certainly on the cost side that you really are building. You have some cost to build the toilet rooms themselves that's above what you'd otherwise do, but you're not really having to build 2 complete toilet rooms. And I think that as more of this is done for various reasons, it will be become probably the accepted way that it's done in the country.
Well, it certainly makes more sense. Yeah, and again, people will get used to that as that becomes the norm. Thanks.
You bet.
Other comments?
I have a question.
Councilor
Go
ahead.
In terms of architecture, is this international style?
I think we like to think of it as, we don't really think about working in a style per se. We really do the best we can to tune into what the community has been looking for, as well as what the city staff has been asking for and looking for. It's our attempt to create a public building in Monmouth style that will, really stand the test of time. And so it's our interpretation of what a modern building, civic building, should be for the city of Monmouth that happens to be on Main Street, where we really need to relate to the existing context and scale and massing. As I mentioned when we were looking at the cost estimate, there are ways, we have our ways, there are ways to articulate that exterior in more detail and relate it more directly to some of the historic precedents. But we also know that the project needs to have a level of modesty to it and ability of a reasonable budget to execute the overall project. So we've kept it fairly simple. But no, we're not intending for it to be an international style building.
Okay, I've been told if it looks like a big brick block, it's international style. I don't know my way around architecture, I'm sorry. But in terms of those bricks, are they structural or are they just decorative?
They are what we call a brick veneer, so they're not structural. They're one layer of brick on the exterior.
Okay, I've had too many opportunities to see lots of bricks on the ground after an earthquake. And then you've got some other costs here that seem kind of cut and dry. They don't, the costs don't include furnishings and equipment and design fees and consultant fees. But one thing that sort of jumps out at me is what's not included is the cost for hazardous material testing and removal. And I think that building was built, does anybody know the year it was built? In the 1930s and 20s? Any guesses?
29.
1929. Okay, so there's probably a good chance that there's some hazardous materials in there, and that can cause your cost to go up pretty dramatically pretty quickly. So I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that we are probably looking at a city hall that's going to be at 10 million or more. And boy, that sounds like a lot of money to me. And in terms of earthquakes, if we're starting this in June of next year, and there are employees who are in that decrepit old building right now, will have to move. Is there any way we can move those people now, Chad? Because it scares me thinking of, that second floor collapsing and the people being hurt or injured in the case of an earthquake.
Well, yeah, certainly you would have options to look at. It would take, if that was the desire of the council, we could go out and take a look and come back with some options, either leasing space or say converting volunteer hall over. COVID, unfortunately, provides some opportunities for rehousing in vacant spaces, but for the interim, it would be, I think if the council so desired, you could do it, but I think you would want to have a kind of a final action that you knew you were working towards versus just relocating.
Okay, I think that would be a way for the council to show that the staff members who work there in that building are important to us. We care about them and we want them to be safe. We live in an earthquake-prone area, and with every day that passes that we don't have an earthquake, the risk of having one increases. So I think those are things to keep in mind to protect our employees who are now working. And particularly if we have to take this on for another year, pass it on for another year, I think it would be really important to find a place for our employees to be safe.
Troy, can you address the Councillor Sharmer's question regarding hazardous materials?
Partially. That it's been my experience that removal of hazardous materials is very work intensive and time intensive when the facility that's being abated is going to be renovated or upgraded. So they have to go in there and they really have to surgically kind of remove things. When you're going to be demoing the facility like we're proposing on this project, you still have to be careful and you can't let things kind of go into the air. But because you are doing a mass demo, the cost in terms of cost per square foot is typically not as high as if you're doing it piecemeal. So the other thing on this project is there's quite a bit of, if it goes forward as proposed, it's quite a bit of demo between the old city hall and the volunteer hall and the site. And the demo contractor would have a fairly clear field and be able to do their work pretty efficiently. So I'm not sure in this case, in terms of the overall project, if the hazardous material cost would be a large amount. And those are the reasons why. But we're not, that's not an area of our expertise, and it might be valuable, if and when the project goes ahead, to get a better handle on how the demo and hazardous abatement might be done. Usually, the abatement contractor would go in and do their work in one shot on buildings like this that are going to be demoed and do it quickly, and then give it over to the general contractor to have the demo contractor go in and do their work without concern about hazardous materials flying around. But to get a better idea of the cost on that, I think it would need to be a bit of a separate study to nail it down more exactly.
Okay, thank you. And I think we need to keep in mind that if there are hazardous materials, they aren't just trucked down to Coffin Butte. They have to be taken to specific land sites. And when I worked in San Francisco, soil that was contaminated with oil had to be hauled away at $700 a cubic yard. And so it can get pretty expensive pretty quickly.
Yes, if you get into contaminated soils, yes. And these type of materials do have to be handled a specific way, and they can only go to specific places. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great question. Others? Councillor Belts again.
Have accommodations been made in the interior for public art or for art to be hung and displayed?
Yeah, with the proposed design, there are some areas where we have the possibility to really have a nice kind of gallery kind of space for public artworks. There was also on the part of the staff team that we worked with, as well as some folks who came to our public meetings, we're really interested in including public artworks in the interior and maybe even the exterior plaza space, for example, that were meaningful and relevant, related to the history and the culture of Monmouth and the area. So like the main circulation space on the first floor between the north and the south main entries. Would be a really nice gallery space for 2D and 3D artworks. And then out in the plaza would be a really great spot for three-dimensional artworks to potentially go. So I think within this design, there's a lot of good public space that would allow for that. Also, the lobby space on the second floor would be a really nice home for some public artworks as well.
Place for a clock tower.
That's not in the budget.
Thanks for that. Councillor Carey.
Sort of to follow up on Roxanne's point, is this building one that would require percent for art installation?
Does the city have a percent for art program in place?
Well, the state of Oregon does.
Yeah, if there is no program in the city and if the state isn't providing any funding, then there's no requirement for percent for art.
Each of the university buildings are required to have that.
Right, there's state of Oregon funding for those projects, I would venture to say, yeah.
I think it's something we definitely should be considering, though.
Yeah, I concur. I would have to say that I think the design is really reflective of the discussions that we had. I think it would be congratulated all of you for putting together a very nice layout. Seems to be a combination of function and form. The one thing that I did wonder about is, and I haven't really drilled all the way down on it, but as I look at it's sort of the schematic, not the schematic, but the rendering inside the building looking north, to the Main Street entrance rather. That seems, that's obviously a hallway, but it also serves as a, almost like a area where people would, because I believe unless I misread the layout, that's sort of where people would come to a window and make payments on utilities and that sort of thing. Is that correct? I'm wondering if that would be a potential for a bottleneck of transportation up and down there, foot traffic north and south, and well, like I said, it looks just kind of like a hallway that people will stop in. It's a fairly minimal criticism, but it's one that I wondered about, and perhaps that could be assisted with furnishings or something. I don't know. Any particular thought to that?
I think we provided ample space for circulation as well as a place for people to kind of sit right by the window as well, to kind of wait, as well as you move further south where the stairs are, that would serve as a circulation and an ante room for the city council chamber as well. So I think we've kind of created not just a circulation, but a place for people to kind of wait and gather as well.
But I think your concern was at the public service counter near the north entry, is that right?
Bottleneck.
Yeah, bottleneck potentially, and really nothing that would cause anyone to stop there. I mean, I don't know, and it's a little tough to tell how wide that is. So I didn't know what the scale was. It may, but it could be plenty wide.
Joe, that's about at the service counter. It's about 10 plus feet wide, isn't it?
Yeah, I want to say 12. I don't have the ability to check it.
I think that the point's well taken, though, and I think that's something that we would certainly want to look at. when we move forward with the next phase of design. It might be that we'd want to look at that and look at options for maybe moving that counter a little bit to create a little more space right there. We could move it to the west a bit possibly, and
Yes.
still have to relate to the open office area of finance and have enough room to work with. So I think that I'm keeping track of all these questions, and I think that's certainly something we should look at in the next iteration.
Yeah, I think if I could just follow up, I think we would work with city employees and figure out how that space is actually used, how many people may be gathering there, because it's a good point that we don't want to create a bottleneck, especially right near the front door.
Of course, the irony of this is we're worried about something that's probably 12 feet wide, 10 at least, and lots of room, and we're dealing with about 15 square feet right now for people that come in and pay their bill. So it's a bit of a moot point, but it might be something. Anyway, thank you for looking at that. My final question has to do with the relocation, and I'm concerned with that. I don't have a real good handle on the actual site map to know whether it would be possible to relocate our people, our staff people into Volunteer Hall while the main building, so that would allow for the demo of City Hall as it exists, move them into Volunteer Hall, build the new building, and then after that demo Volunteer Hall and build a parking lot. I don't know what the adjacencies are there and whether that would be possible, because I'm concerned about, well, I think everybody is concerned about where our people are going to go for the construction time here. So I'm wondering whether that would be, whether there's enough on the property there for that to work.
There might be. We in our first phase of study last year, we looked at Volunteer Hall. We don't have it on the site diagram, the site plan right now, but it could be possible that we could keep that Volunteer Hall. We'd have to look at that, where it is and the layout we're proposing and where the utilities and services and things are, to see if we'd be causing a bottleneck in how that new City Hall might get built, or if we're causing any problems with being able to accommodate the new utilities and things that would be brought in. But it's say blanket kind of overall, I think it could work, because right now the parking we're proposing to the south of the proposed City Hall is where Volunteer Hall is right now.
It seems to me early on when we had this conversation, the new construction would not impede on Volunteer Hall, that we could potentially use it. So again, we hadn't quite explored that, to death, so to speak, but it's the footprint of a new expanded City Hall doesn't overlap onto Volunteer Hall. So there may be an option to do that.
And I think what we've talked about exploring is the other city facilities. We have some space for growth in our other city facilities. And while we might want to have our utility counter fairly close to where it normally is, whether that's at Volunteer Hall or even temporarily at a senior center location, which is still very central for folks, we can relocate on a temporary basis management, for example, to power and light, to, we can have our municipal court potentially at the police station. So we have some other, space that could work on a temporary basis to redeploy. And building and community development, maybe that would work in Volunteer Hall. I don't know exactly, but we could look at other space options that we have, and I think we can do that fairly affordably.
There's options, yeah.
I think the other interesting thing is every corporation, every public entity now knows what it's like to have folks work from home. So that was an option that certainly we, might have been more hesitant to explore in pre-COVID days, but it gives us a lot more flexibility.
Mhm. Yep.
That's all for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Something else, or was that Spike's tail or Zoe's tail? Chris Lopez. Hi, Zoe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and hello, Zoe. I have a question regarding the environment and any eco-friendly initiatives that have been built into the building during the design phase. I know the south-facing windows were mentioned, but I'd be curious if there was anything else specifically taken into account.
Yeah, one of the things that we like to do with our projects is to orient them, and I think you're alluding to this. We like to orient as much of the long faces of the building to the north and the south as possible, because that's ideal for passive sustainable design options. Here, it's a variation on the theme because we really needed to also address Main Street and do so in a form and in a scale that was appropriate. So here we've oriented a lot of the building with the long side facing south, but part of it's also facing west. But that was because of the historic context on Main Street. The other aspect of this is that we have some fairly large roof areas where we would be able to look at photovoltaic installation, and the orientation of those roofs is really works nicely for that. And because they are proposed as low slope roofs, we have some very recent experience in installing, designing for and coordinating design of PV arrays. And so I guess that's one of the things we're looking at. Something else that's indicated, we always try to maximize the efficiency of the mechanical systems that we specify for the building. And we have, our outdoor space that we proposed, the terrace. There could be some green roof areas there potentially. I think looking at our recent projects, though, we get the most benefit from active systems like photovoltaic arrays. We can also do things like look at that photovoltaic array layout and install infrastructure for them to be installed later. There are programs out there as well for entities such as the city can apply for programs that provide funding to install systems like that. We're just finishing the Beaverton Public Safety Center in Beaverton, and it has a very large photovoltaic array that is helping to keep that building powered up and running in a severe emergency where all power is lost. And that system was installed because of a PGE grant program that they were able to successfully apply for. So I think this project has some of those potentials built in kind of to the scheme that we're looking at.
Additionally, Troy, the construction of the building itself, we've proposed CLT cross-laminated timber, so that's in the floor, and the roof, and then in some of the wall structure. So that's a sustainable wood product, and quite possibly from within, what would it be, within 200 miles of Monmouth?
Yeah,
I
the
like-
mass timber systems that we're proposing here are ones that we've been increasingly looking at from a design perspective. And we've finished several projects in the last few years that incorporate these systems. And they have a number of advantages that we've talked to a little bit here. And I think that is a non-active but built into the fabric of the building kind of sustainable design approach.
And I think you have one in the university that's a good example of that one. I think it's a wall to the stair, I believe. And there is a good story on the timber carbon sequestration as well as part of the story that you could tell on the sustainability side. So the embodied energy of using wood instead of steel and concrete is a good way to kind of look at it sustainability wise as well. So.
Can I
Thank you.
just add, oh, are you done, Chris? Are you
Oh,
finished?
yes, please go ahead.
I was just going to say that my house is designed to accommodate solar panels on the roof. And when it was finished, I got an estimate for that. And it was about $25,000. And then I looked at my monthly Monmouth Power and Light electric bill, which was $25. And I thought, I think it's going to take me 100 years to see any return on this investment. And Monmouth doesn't participate in the Oregon Energy Trust because we have our own little utility, and so we don't get any tax breaks if we put in solar panels. So, but that said, it's always a good idea to think of the environment first, and that kind of passive solar electricity is a good thing to be thinking about now and in the future.
So unless there are other comments about this phase, the next thing we have to talk about this evening is the money part. So if we're ready to move to that.
So Janet's going to try to pull that up on
Yeah,
the
Phyllis,
screen.
if you can make me presenter, please.
And do we want to keep our architects on for further input on that, or can we let them go?
Yeah, I guess unless you're super interested in how we make sausage, Troy and Richard and Joe, you guys are free to go. But I do appreciate the work you guys have put into the project. It's really, I think it reflects, certainly the downtown business district, and it's very attractive and functional.
Yep, it's amazing. Got a couple of comments in the chat, even from folks who are appreciative of what we're trying to do and how it does reflect Monmouth, very much so. So thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. And we're not done with you. We'll see you again in future steps, but this is exciting. Thanks.
It is indeed, and it's really been a pleasure for us to work for the city and interface with your community to further the vision for this project. And I think that the main thing that we're trying to do is create a design that has a very high value component, because this will serve the city for a long, long time, and it holds an important place in downtown. So with that, thanks again to all of you for having us continue. And thank you for all of your questions. And we look forward to the next phase of this.
Thanks, Troy.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Have a good evening, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
In the council's packet, there's a memorandum from Janet and myself, and I'll just kind of do the intro, and then you can make Janet run the gauntlet. The first page, talking about background, basically just is intended to outline the types of financing sources that you could use on this type of capital project. And the first one is that special capital reserve. So if you remember during the budget, and I can't speak prior to the budget, there is money in reserves for the City Hall project that the city is currently using to pay for the work that's being done by FFA. And if I remember right, the magnitude of that number currently is about $400,000.
Right.
Okay, so that's what the city has done in the past. Now, this first one, though, you'll remember in the budget, each of the funds, water, sewer, power and light, building fund, and the general fund, all made contributions to reserves that totaled approximately $1 million. So, and they were prorated, so it wasn't an equal distribution, but it was prorated based on
their total budgeted expenses.
Total budgeted expenses. So the intent of that, and I remember the question, but the intent of that is over a 2-year period was to build up a reserve equal to about $2 million. So that's when I talk about the special capital reserve, that's what we're talking about. The rationale for that is that each of the enterprise activities, water, sewer, street fund, power and light, building, they all require the city operations. So the city hall, they rely on the city manager's office, finance office, and so on to perform part of their duties and their functions. So it's from an equity standpoint, it's fair for those funds to contribute to the city hall project. I guess to some extent you could always start to parse through the percentages and the numbers, but in essence, I'm just talking about a fair contribution from each of the enterprise activities to the project. The other 3 items are just pretty understandable. There's the issuance of full faith and credit via bank loans, the issuance of general obligation, which I think historically is the most traditional type of financing that you use for large general purpose capital facilities, city halls, parks, you used it for the police facility and so on. And then the last item is the urban renewal district contributing some funding to the project. So those are kind of just the ideas, the places you can go and think of. Now there can be nuances and you can massage these things to be more and less, but those are kind of the 4 pots that you're looking at. So then I asked Janet to take a look at, okay, so what alternatives does the city council have to look at? This is on the 2nd page. And again, think of this just in terms of magnitude. This isn't, we didn't go through the numbers in any great detail. We just said, let's look at 4 options. Certainly there can be more options than the 4, but we said, let's just look at the magnitude of what it could look like. So the first 3 are all talking about the use of general bond, but to greater and lesser degrees. So the first one, a geo bond large, this option relies heavily on a geo bond. So if you have a $9 million project, for example, I have to remember, don't forget that you have these others there that are going to contribute $2 million from special reserves, probably some urban renewal dollars that we, on the project sheet, we identified at $2.25 million. Okay, so just remember, there's those there to talk about, but the balance would be done using some type of geo amount, and for this, we looked at $5 million as just kind of a magnitude number. So that's a large geo contribution. Median contribution was less, so you would increase the other contributing. You would look at the other contributing funds, financial mechanisms, increase those and reduce your geo obligation bond that you put out to the electors. So for example, we would reduce the geo bond from $5 to $3 million and increase the other 2 equally between the special reserves and the urban renewal contribution. The urban renewal contribution, by and large, isn't really an issue that you would have to be concerned with too greatly at this point, other than it would affect some of the projects on that spreadsheet that I provided to the council. The one that the one that would have impact with the city is using the internal special reserves. So the contributions from water, sewer, power and light, street fund, and building fund. So the longer their contributions go on, the less capital they have for other activities, and it obviously will have some impact on rate. So as that goes up, impact over on those operations is greater, general obligation goes down, and the urban renewal is I just am kind of looking at that as a residual bucket that they would contribute to. And yes, it would have an impact on projects, but it would be less apparent to the public for sure. Right. The small ones, so now you're looking at a small GO bond of $1.25 million as an example. And again, you're increasing the internal contributions to $4 million and the urban renewal contribution to $4 million. So again, you're still going out for a GO bond. There's some strategery, I've always liked that word, that goes into how you put a bond out on the ballot, because at least my experience has been that GO bonds are really not very successful, especially for a city hall project. City halls are boring. You pay money that you don't want to pay to those. They don't sizzle like a municipal pool, for example, and athletic facilities and things that have engaged the community more in more pleasurable activities. So you would look at something small. The last one is, okay, what would it look like if we didn't rely on a GO bond at all? So again, you would try to build up your internal reserves, such as what we're doing now. It would take probably, you would have to defer the construction out some period of time to build that reserve up, but maybe a year or two. So you would have some additional costs that would come on. If you remember alternative one that was presented by FFA had a deferral cost of putting it off. So you would have to build that up, and you would have to contribute more from your urban renewal agency. And probably, I think you would go out and secure a loan. I can't speak to what the loan would look like, but let's assume it's a full faith and credit type of loan. And over whatever term that would be. So again, 10-year to 20-year term. I'm a short-term guy, if you can do it, because I don't like paying interest just like anybody else. And you have demonstrated that the enterprise funds can contribute funds to this. So they would just be making the debt service payments on your loans over a period of time. I think, again, that's a viable option. And the downside of that is, of course, you're committing, at least in the short term, you're committing some department activities, that they would prefer to use the money on something else than helping to build a city hall. That's probably, you have that competition that's going on for the money from the departments, but certainly you would be able to create a revenue stream, a debt service stream to pay the debt off. And you've already demonstrated that you can do that because we have the first year going into reserve of $1 million towards a $9 million project. If you pull the trigger now, you'd probably have department heads wanting to meet with you personally at your house to talk to you about that idea. But I think it's an idea that you could do if you really kind of wanted to knuckle down and bear it for a 5 to 10 year period. But again, you have the urban renewal agency that's going to kick in. So let's say under that option, you said, well, the agency kicks in half of the project at $4.5 million. In 2 years, you're going to have $2 million from contributions, and you have a $400,000 in reserve currently. You're pretty close to being home. I mean, to me, looking at it, I certainly, even though $9 million is a big number, we haven't talked about value engineering. We haven't talked about the facade. You know, do you want brick? It's going to cost extra. You're going to have people that are going to talk to the council and say, well, I could build that for $500,000. Believe me, I've heard it many times. They can't, but they think they can because their house only cost them $350,000. So, you know, how hard can it be? But you haven't talked about value engineering. You haven't talked about some of the particulars, you know, that you would do in the next phase as you go to final design. But depending on how much you want to use your urban renewal agency to contribute to the project, I think it's viable. And that's all I have. I can answer questions, or Janet, I hogged all the attention there for a minute. Sorry.
Sorry, Laurel, go ahead.
Is it pretty much accepted that we would put at least part of this out to the ballot for a general obligation bond, and the no-go, I like that, the no-go option is would only be used if the bond is not approved by the voters? Is that right?
We haven't made that determination as to which. We were just trying to provide you with options. Okay. And I thought it was important to demonstrate. I thought it was important to demonstrate to the council that there is an option to go without a general obligation bond. Now, it might be a little painful to some of your departments, but I would not feel that I had done due diligence if I didn't at least outline that as an option.
And I think, again, none of this includes the cost we just asked about: relocation, leasing, renting, all those things. So those aren't things you can easily finance. Those are things typically you do have to come from reserves to build that part into it. But Janet, and then
I just wanted to add something more. I think it is important for us to keep in mind that before COVID, there were 2 bond issues on the ballot that were turned down. One was for improving the county fairgrounds, and the other was for improving the county courthouse. And while the voters are usually pretty willing to approve bonds for law enforcement, first responders, they're not usually so crazy about having their property taxes go up to pay for things like city halls. But it's encouraging to see that if a bond issue is not approved by the voters, that we still have a way of making this happen. So thank you for that.
Janet?
The only thing actually I would add is that a general obligation bond is very much, as Chad said, a traditional way to finance these. And one of the pros for it, you know, as far as talking about a general obligation bond in this context, is that, you know, a new building is needed. And so, as Chad said, the value engineering can still go on. The price tag is big, but a general obligation bond, you know, is something that Civic Pride they can have part of that building as well. And the fact that otherwise it's going to tumble down on, speaking for my staff and I, tumble down on us in the 9.0 or maybe sooner. You know, I think there's a lot to be said for having that buy-in from the public. It's much more obvious through a general obligation bond than it is through self-financing. And it sort of gets that opportunity for the citizenry to take pride in the building, if it can be built in a cost-effective way and result in a functional yet beautiful building.
And you do have support from the IO. If you remember, there was an editorial that supported the replacement, the new building to come on. And Janet and I have had this discussion. I probably would say that she's a little more optimistic than I am as far as how GO bonds go, because I would, I would repeat Councillor Sharmer's comments, the public safety, buildings, police, fire, rescue, those things, there's a lot of support for those in the community. City halls, community facilities, well, city halls, are just a little bit tougher. But that being said, and I don't have a good sense of what the community will support since I'm an interim. It could be that a $2 to $3 million type of bond would, people would look at that and recognize that the city did its due diligence, has really they put skin in the game. They've really come to the table ready to play by buying off a big chunk of that. And, that you're not going to the voters for, the whole project, for example.
A lot of it is in the messaging, and $2 to $3 million over 20 years at today's interest rates because of the pandemic. I mean, it's hard to beat. I mean, it really is an opportune time if the messaging is appropriate.
Yeah, and looking at the trade-offs, that's what we always have to think of, because doing it all internally means making choices. Right. And as we are talking about having other difficult conversations about rate increases, using our internal transfers, our internal reserves, building up the money ourselves by foregoing other projects means everybody pays. Everybody will suffer from those rate increases, and we know the future cost of those only goes up, up, and up. At least getting the city hall built in a 1 year time frame, the costs are pretty fixed at that point, and then we're just financing them. So a lot different than looking at kicking other capital projects down the road as those costs increase every time we kick that down the road. So lots of good options. Again, really impressed this year. We've made a commitment to start putting this money aside, and I think that's really critical. But I will also, if we go forward with this in a general obligation bond, remind folks it isn't just an office building, right? It is our public building. It is a building into which we invite folks. And I'm sitting in Volunteer Hall that has been used for numerous public functions, not only public meetings, but also trainings. People rent this room. They've done yoga in it. I mean, this is an active public building in addition to just office space. So we deserve a nice space for that. We can always use better space in this community for those kind of things. So I think we can make a case, certainly, with the kind of care we're taking to move this forward. Roxanne.
Yeah, I think kind of going off of that idea, I know when we've done bonds for chariots, the one that was successful was the one where there was the most input from our board of directors, which would be obviously us. And the messaging was, this is for you, and it was just so clear that when the people voted for it, it was like they realized, oh, we're voting for transportation for us. And if I don't use it, I know somebody that does. And so I think so much of the success of this will be based on what the messaging is. And the messaging needs to be that this is Monmouth's, that this is the community. Everybody's asking for it. Here's all the things it does for everybody. And I just think we all absolutely have to be behind whatever that measure is. If we decide we're going to go for the medium or the small or the large, we all have to be using the same messaging, and we're going to have to work. We're going to have to do a lot of work and a lot of community engagement. And we're going to need to talk to people and make sure they know that this is theirs. It's not for us. This is for Monmouth. So
It's my soapbox.
Chris Lopez.
I think Councillor Belts really hit it on the head there. We can do a lot of work, but if we don't really get buy-in, and that's through how it's messaged and how how we promote it and how we speak about it, none of this is going to happen, regardless of which avenue we take. As soon as we go for a go bond, or if we do go for a go bond and it gets voted down, it's on people's radar. And if then cost of services goes up, I think that's even worse than just cost of services going up to begin with and not going for a go bond. It's almost a referendum as it was. Are there any outlets to look to for whether it's the COG or some other organization that we can ping for ideas on how to message this proactively and how to do it right?
I think that, you can talk to other entities, that other councils, League of Oregon Cities actually has really good leadership who have done very successful bonds on all kinds of fronts, including city halls. And so, that network is a wonderful way to try. Certainly you can look on Oregon ballots on the state website and see which ballot measures passed and talk to those entities. That's what my inclination would be.
Yeah. So in the past, when I worked on projects that required something like this, we would reach out to our various peers and solicit input as to strategies that they use to engage the community for this. The only comment that I would have about that is I always considered it pretty important to be a homegrown, grassroots effort. We do it. We don't hire the slick person to come in and develop, the bright, shiny stuff. We get out there and we do it. And when in Carlton, when we were looking at the City Hall project using FFA, and we didn't go for a City Hall geo bond per se. We were going to use a combined, like you try to do. We were going to use the geo bond for the public safety facility, and we were going to use the other resources that we could for the City Hall piece. And I must have had at least 15 small group presentations with 15 people, and we went out and we did a lot of engagement to the community. Now it still failed 60-40, which was my joke at the beginning, because that's what Salem's bond had gone down 60-40. And I remember telling the chief at the time, I said, okay, we're at 60-40 before we start, so we got to swing 11%. And we finished at 60-40. But I really like the grassroots, homegrown, engagement where we're out kind of working, because it's our project. While we could use advice, I think it's better to go out and solicit, talk to others where it worked.
And I'll tell you, Chris, our last successful bond as a city was the police station purchase and refurbishment. And we did do some polling on that. We did have some professional polling to sort of determine the community appetite for the costs on that. And those kinds of things are pretty common in any kind of effort where you do some sort of checking with the community before you go, so you know what the pinch points are, what the sensitive points are. But other than that, we as a community have been pretty successful. Again, our fire department has an operating levy, our county has an operating levy, we did our library, we did our police station. So I think doing those internally is pretty common for us in this community.
And I wasn't here, but I understand from my colleagues that the last time that we put the City Hall on the ballot, it was actually extremely close, and that part of the challenge was the mixed messaging that occurred from leadership. And so again, being all on the same page, provided you are all on the same page, obviously, that seems to be very critical to it. And I think this community has said again and again that they are interested in having a safe and functional and beautiful building on Main Street. And that's why it's part of the urban renewal project list as well, and has been a city council goal for a long time.
Well, and I think we have private developers investing in our downtown. They've been doing it for a long time. We've got a lot of new activity here. It sure seems like we need to step up and do our part to take improve their view as they are improving our view. So more conversation to come, but any last questions, Darren?
Yeah, I would like to see us, I guess, kind of get our logic down and arguments for the urban renewal portion. And, we've got an opportunity there. If whatever we can rationalize, that could really leverage pretty well against the project. I mean, I'm seeing, 2 million versus 4 million roughly there. So I think that's one we need to nail down early if that's what a piece of what we're going to use. I think that the messaging then is really, really important. I thought we did a pretty good job with the police station and the property and all that. And really the council was behind that. And, so once we get that messaging figured out, we all got to help go out and sell it. We got lots of signatures. We did all kinds of stuff to make that work. So, again, I think we just got to keep moving forward now that we have well, to me, it looks like a very nice plan for the facility. If we can get the financing kind of nailed down and all get of one mind for the most part, then we're at 80% there in my mind.
Some guidance or direction for staff about when you want to move this along, John?
A couple things, and without being redundant or too much so, I think everybody's talking about messaging. I think that's important. And I like the fact that we would be able to show the city's contribution, that the city is contributing to this, that we just don't simply have our hand out to the voters. I think it's important, and a little bit to Darren's point, we need to make certain that we're able to identify the urban renewal contribution as it relates to urban redevelopment downtown, economic impact of that. A lot of the things we want to do with that urban renewal fund is to stimulate the economy and build a basis for future expansion. And so we need to be able to tie that in there to the degree that we can. And then I think it's important to be upfront with the voters. I wouldn't be opposed to some of the other sort of things, but the reality is if we keep building a budget here, that the reality is that we're going to be cutting services, or we're going to be limited in services, and we're going to be likely increasing rates. That my tummy doesn't feel good about that. I think there's a little of that, but not a whole bunch of it. So I think we're up front with it. And if it goes down, it goes down. Now we'll need to decide how big we want to go. That's part of it. But my bigger question is when? If we're going to do this GO bond at any level, when are we going to do it? November is like tomorrow. And November is the best time because there's going to be a lot of people voting. And in the city of Monmouth, there'll be an active, depending on whether there's students here or not, there'll be an active group that is likely to be favorable towards this sort of a project. I think we need some direction. I remember a little differently than I think our role in the police deal was informational. I think, and if we didn't, we should have had a political action group that can go out and be persuasive. And whether that's the Monmouth business people or who, I don't know. But we need to, we can, and Lane will correct me here if I'm wrong, but I think that we're able to provide information. Remember, we were, I wouldn't say shackled, but we were advised to be very careful about that. If we were to go to May or some other special, we've got to think about the double majority, I think, don't we? That needs to be part of the consideration. And then finally, do we have any bonds that are expiring in the sort of medium term? I know none in the near, but maybe in the medium. That's all.
If I can weigh in just on that for just a second, I will say you could write off this November. I was looking up the election calendar as you were speaking, John, but we're coming very close. Before we can get a measure turned into the county clerk, we have to have the council has to adopt a ballot title resolution that has to be published in the itemizer, period of time for challenges to be filed to the ballot title. And I just running those numbers, looking at the calendar, I think you couldn't make the deadline to get the ballot measure to the clerk in time for the November election. My recollection is that May is not a double majority election anymore. I think it is not. So I don't think you'd be looking at a double majority then. What else? There was one other thing I was going to say about that, but yeah. So yeah, I think November is out of the question. May is feasible, and I do not believe that's a double majority election.
Correct. So Roxanne lost connection, and I think Laurel might have as well. So kind of want to take some last comments and wrap up if we can't get them back. Darren?
I was going to say, we did have a pact for the police station. And again, that's where it allows us as council members to really be active and stuff. And so I would think that would make sense again if we're going to go back out. And we need to do that well in front of our process. So, we got plenty of time. Like you said, no way this November, but, we could be starting first of the year basically for next November, a year from now, per se.
Yeah, and just that's the other thing I was going to mention, just so you have this in mind. Council members can advocate for a ballot measure all the way up to election day. The limitation is on the ability to use city staff, city resources to advocate, and that the cutoff date for that is the filing of the measure with the county clerk. So if you could do November, you'd essentially be cutting that opportunity off from the get-go. To be able to use city staff or resources for any kind of anything more than just basic information. So that is the election limitation that you have. Once the measure is filed with the county, city resources can't be used. City employees can't be out advocating for it on city time. Council members, though, you can advocate right up to election day.
Question about the bond or not?
Pardon?
Given the fact that November's off the table, and we may be looking at May, we probably ought to, let the cost estimators know that the June of 21 start date is probably going to be off the table as well, wouldn't you think?
I don't think I can say that for sure.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did
once you get it approved, you can get to market pretty quickly.
Yeah, once it gets approved, you can move pretty quick on that. And again, we'll have sufficient resources. We'll have some resources in hand at that point. And the agency, again, we're asking for the Urban Renewal Agency to have a meeting this month so that we can have some discussion about this, because this is a big piece of the agency's funding and projects. So just like what Darren said earlier, we do need, the agency needs clarity as to, is this going to be one of your signature projects, that the agency is going to do. So, but I think if you go to the May election, my experience has been you can move pretty quick. Yeah.
And I would say as well, if it's tax exempt debt, which I've been harping on a lot lately to Chad's chagrin.
Yeah.
Spending it down quickly for arbitrage concerns, even though our interest rates are super low and we probably wouldn't be subject to arbitrage, but would be the preferred approach. And so, yes, we can turn around quite quickly. And to your point also, Councillor Carey, about the timing of bonds coming off, our earliest full faith and credit bonds that are coming off are in 2026, the sewer bonds. And so they're sewer bonds and we're actually paying for them with sewer monies, but they are full faith and credit. And then 2028 is the next one with our pension obligations. So it's not near term, and I don't know if you consider that medium term.
I consider that short term.
That's pretty short.
Okay.
We don't have a lot hanging there.
No,
Yeah.
but just as far as if you're trying to, yes, you can talk about 2026 and 2028, our debt load coming down as a finer point.
Yeah.
I do think we'd want to have a conversation with our people, about that scenario, because if you've got a May election and you've got bids and you've got, there's a lot of ordering and there's a lot of, preparation work that needs to be done on the part of the contractors. Are they going to, I simply don't know whether they would be, what their interest levels would be. Obviously they would do it on a, pending approval by the voters, but I just don't know. If everybody's comfortable with that, then so am I, but I just don't know whether we could turn it in June, maybe in September. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we can talk, let's talk as an urban renewal agency, because I think that is something. I am also interested in our economic development ad hoc advisory committee, sort of giving some feedback about this, because again, it's a major impact on downtown. So I think we can gather a little bit more information before we go down that road. For example, September is a special election, which we would have to pay for, and double majority and all that. So, we don't need to get into those weeds right now.
Right.
I think the urban renewal will be our next step.
Yeah. So I think the decision by the agency will kind of dictate which option you look at, how much money the agency is willing to contribute to the project to some extent is going to answer some of these other questions. And I think just to Councillor Carey's comment, if you have a May 21 election, the financing piece is not, it's a discussion about readiness to proceed. And is it a June 1st versus September 15th discussion? Is it all of the 285,000 that FFA identified if it goes out to like June 22? Those questions will just be answered over time. But I don't think the magnitude on this schedule is, I think you're in a wheelhouse that you shouldn't be too worried about escalation, which really goes to the heart of your comment.
Cease?
Yes.
Could I just,
Yes.
I haven't just to bring up the election calendar while we've been talking. And so you could shoehorn this into November, but I'm going to urge you not to. August 14 is the last day to publish a ballot title, which for us means August 12th, because that's Wednesday, which is next Wednesday, which means you would have to have the ballot title drafted and you would have to meet and approve it by noon this Friday. And I'm going to suggest that there's probably not enough time to put all the ducks in line to make that work. Even though technically the calendar would accommodate it, I'm going to say I don't think you're there yet to get a ballot title done in 3 days' time.
Elaine, it sounds like this is, are you daring us? Is that a challenge?
But I'm concerned that somebody might go home and check the calendar tonight on the Secretary of State's website and say, well, Shetterly said it was too late, and it's not too late. So I'm letting you know it's not too late, but I think it's too late.
Yeah, I know. I'm just teasing.
All right, both Roxanne and Laurel lost connection. Roxanne's back on the phone. I did promise council that we could take just a brief moment of council comments because we didn't have that on the agenda earlier. So if you have a few thoughts you want to share, please take a moment, be brief, and we can do that now. Anybody?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Roxanne.
I just wanted to thank Power and Light and Chuck's team for coming out to Edwards Edition after our construction crew messed up our power. And from the time our power went out to the time it was back on was less than 60 minutes today. It was so impressive. And I called them and told them thank you. So good job.
Thanks.
They do good work.
They do good work. They do damn fine work. It helps that, you know, they were across the field from from where the construction accident happened and the tractor cut through the line. But yeah. Any other comments? Chris?
You know, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I will encourage everyone to be safe, wear masks, follow government orders, pay attention to what the governor's saying, and do what you can to save yourselves and your neighbors and loved ones.
Thanks. And I'll just make a brief, just to let everyone know, we did have a large crowd here this evening. I think you could see them on the computer that we had set outside. We had also here in the room, and you couldn't see that because we don't have our streaming camera, but we did have 9 people who were here and indicated they were supporting Bodie's comments. So I did let his comments go on a little longer simply because he had other folks who were interested or indicated they were here to support him. And I let those comments go on. And I know we don't respond to those, and I will be getting the full text of what Bodie spoke about, and I will try to respond some of that, I think, on behalf of myself personally, but also on behalf of council, that there are clearly some misconceptions going on. We have actually not talked at all about defunding police, and that hasn't really been asked of us. So somehow I think conversations going on outside our community are really starting to seep in. I'm going to speak for myself only personally, but I think I know all of you well enough to say that none of us is interested in implementing any form of government other than the one that we have, which honors our Constitution, honors the laws of our country. And I know that was, again, a reaction and a comment. Maybe these people feel because of what's going on outside of Monmouth, but I know that doesn't relate to Monmouth or to any of us. And I want a chance to thoughtfully respond to some of that, meet with Bodie myself, have him take that back to the group, that our interest in looking at issues of justice and equality and economic opportunity are born of our desire to make this a better community to live for all, and certainly don't want that to be seen as divisive. We've had some extremely thoughtful comments and presentations from folks, and I do know Bodie well, and his was heartfelt as well. And there will be opportunities through our roundtable discussions to bring folks together and to have more of those kind of honest conversations where people are not making assumptions and not ascribing beliefs, I think, that are unfair because they are not born of any action we're taking here or that we have been asked to do. So that's my comment about that. We are listening to everyone everyone gets a say, and we will be able to respond in another time. Just couldn't do that this evening. So,
Madam Mayor, I would just like
Yes,
to
John.
say, from my perspective, and I think probably others, I think you did a masterful job of handling the in-room crowd today. It was a wise move to allow the expansion of time because it was coherent all the way from the beginning to the end. And with others in the room, it saved us all some time. So your diplomacy was recognized and appreciated.
thank you. All right. No other comments. I will then entertain a motion for adjournment. Chad, you don't get to move that. Darren,
Okay, I had a community announcement quick though. Can I do that still?
oh, quick. Thank
Quick.
you. Yes,
Okay,
community.
so the next 3 Tuesdays, we still have food boxes coming to St. Patrick's Church, and the timing is always interesting. So look at it at the St. Patrick's Church Facebook page, but it's been around 200 boxes each of the past Tuesdays. Great help to the community, I believe, and it's going to happen at least the last one that right now scheduled is Tuesday, August 25th. So every Tuesday morning, sometime between 9:45 and 12:45, I would expect it to happen. And then I
Yes, thank
recommend adjournment.
you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Oh. Thank you, Roxanne, for adding in, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thursday, 5:30.
Thursday at 5:30. Don't forget.